It is not something that I sit down and like have a agenda for or a plan or anything like that. Like it is very authentic, organic. Like sometimes I sit down, I have no idea what I'm going to talk about. But the thing that's amazing about it is by far the thing I've gotten the most engagement and response from.
That was Bree Hester, and this is episode 90 of the Chopped Podcast. Hey everyone, I'm Marley of the blog Namely Marley. Thanks for joining me today. This is the Chopped Podcast and I am your host. And you know, this podcast is designed for people just like you, bloggers who love food. My goal each week is to share with you thoughts, stories, interviews, everything related to food blogging so we can all learn together about what works with food blogging and maybe even a little bit about what doesn't. Today, I'm talking to Bree Hester of the site Baked Bree, and we are talking about communicating with your email list. Because everything I see lately talks about how important it is to grow your list this way and grow your list that way, but nothing talks to me, at least nothing that I've found, talks about, how you communicate to that list. What do you do once you build that list up? Or even if you just have 100 or 200 people on your list, what do you say to them? I think that gets to feel a little bit like some pressure over time. For me, sometimes it's like I'm sitting in front of a blank screen, staring at it, trying to decide what to say and trying to sound authentic and, trying to get a point across. It just can feel overwhelming sometimes, especially if you're trying to do that on a weekly basis. I know some people even talk about doing it on a daily basis, which sounds very overwhelming to me. But anyway, if you've sent an email out to your newsletter list and received an unsubscribe and you feel hurt, like, how could they do this? I worked so hard on that email. I know you're paying on that one too, because that, it just happens. Have you seen that video on Facebook where the woman talks about how her dad would ask all the kids at the dinner table how they failed that day? He really wanted them to talk about something they tried that didn't work out, I guess just to kind of make them feel more used to failing and being okay with it, because it's just failing is the way that you get better and get better and get better. And then the next thing you know, you're successful at something. I'm also listening to a podcast interview right now with the comedian Michael Ian Black, and he's talking about failure too. And oh my God, can you even imagine the kind of failure that a comedian must go through? Because his point was, you can write a joke on paper and it sounds great, and you'll have several jokes lined up, and he gets in front of an audience, and the joke that maybe he didn't think was going to work out is great, but the jokes that he really was attached to, just bomb. And, it's one thing to bomb in writing. You write something and nobody responds to it, but can you imagine bombing on stage and you're wanting people to laugh and everybody is just standing there staring at you? I mean, he made it sound like it's pretty terrible. And I was right there with him. I could just totally feel what he was going through, because it just sounds terrible. But anyway, he talks about the importance of getting up there and doing that and facing that fear of rejection, because it actually makes you a better comedian. You go stronger through that rejection. So I think sometimes that's how we should be looking at our email list. Like, we are going to get some unsubscribes, and yes, that can feel like rejection and it can feel like failure, but just keep at it, and that's how you grow stronger. So Bree and I are talking about that today because, Bree has a wonderful email newsletter, and she talks about how she's developed it over the years, and she talks about the style of writing that she uses. She says that she imagines that she's writing to a friend, which I think is great advice. And she talks about the wonderful community that she's built up as a result. And we talk about a lot of other stuff too. It's a very good discussion. I think you're going to love it. I can't wait to share it with you. But first, a quick word about the Chopped Conference. Chopped Conference is right around the corner and tickets are going fast. So sure, I could talk to you about the amazing speakers and the great food and the awesome bloggers who are going to be there that you can network with. But what I really want to talk with you about is magic, because we're going to have some there in more ways than one. You won't believe the surprises we have rolled up our sleeves. You just have to come to experience it yourself. And look, we purposefully choose a small venue to keep the event intimate. That's so perfect for the energy of the event, but it means that we only have a few tickets left, so hurry and get yours today. Head to chopcon.com today and click on register. I can't wait to see you there. Okay, let's get right to today's feature interview with Bree Hester. Today's intro shout out goes to Nora of the site A Clean Bake. First of all, Nora, I have to tell you, I love your name. Anyway, Nora said she was listening to the Chopped podcast recently while preparing for a long day of coding. Oh, Nora, that does not sound great, but I'm so glad to be there with you in spirit. So everyone, fire up your computers, turn up the speakers, and let's talk about all things food blogging and so much more. Hey everyone, I'm happy to have Bree Hester of the site Baked Bree on the show today. Hey Bree, welcome to the Chopped podcast.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I'm happy to have you on the show because I'm really looking forward to talking with you today about something that's been intriguing me for a while, which is email campaigns, and not like how to grow them, but how to deliver content and write to your email list. But before we get into that, I just would love for you to share more about your blog and what caused you to start it.
Sure. So Baked Bree is, oh my goodness, it's almost 7 years old.
Wow.
So it's been around for a while. And so Baked Bree started very accidentally. I was a school teacher before I had children. And I married my husband, Wes, who is a search and rescue pilot in the Coast Guard. And so we move around all the time. We're moving like every 2-3 years, sometimes even more than that. And when I stopped teaching to have my oldest son, William, I became a portrait photographer. And I had a moderately successful portrait business, and I loved it. But at the time, I had 3 babies in 4 years. And it was just kind of not great for my family life at the time. So I shut my portrait business down. I was totally fine with that. And on a whim, I decided to start a separate blog just for food because I always had people over and I always was a cook. And people would come for dinner and they'd be like, hey, they'd call me the next day and say, hey, can I have that recipe? And I'm like, oh my God, this is the best idea ever. No one's ever thought of this before. And I'm like, I'm going to start a blog just for food.
Okay, my recipe's online.
Yeah, I had no idea like the Pioneer Woman existed or Swing Kitchen. I was so stupid. So that was almost 7 years ago. And Baked Bree is a recipe blog. And my intention was really to teach people how to cook. So most of the recipes, probably like 95% of them, have step-by-step photos. Because I wanted people to feel like they could cook alongside me and see what the process looked like. Because I feel like a lot of people don't have a lot of confidence in the kitchen. And it kind of just grew from there.
Wow. I think that's a great story. I love hearing about people who start, really as a hobby, maybe just to share their recipes with friends, and then it just takes off. That's exciting.
Well, I think the thing that helped me at the time was that, one, I had already been a blogger because as a photographer, you have to keep a blog because it's essentially your real-time portfolio.
Yeah.
And we're military, so we moved all the time. It was just easier than calling my family. It was like, oh, just look, there are pictures up there.
Yeah.
But the thing that helped me as a food blogger was that I was already a photographer.
I was going to ask you about that. So you walked in with photography skills, but how was the transition to shooting food?
So yeah, I knew how to take a picture, but my food pictures were hideous. And it's so funny because I will see something on Pinterest that was like years ago, and it's so bad. And I'm like, oh, the internet is forever. Nothing dies.
Bree, the thing is, every food blogger out there just took a sigh of relief because, they walked into it with no skills and took lousy photos. So if you can say that and you had the skills, it helps us all know this is hard stuff.
It is. And you know what I tell people all the time? It's kind of like my stupid, dumb dad joke, but like, it's really easy to connect with a 3-year-old. I can make any 3-year-old look good because I can tell them a joke, I can play with them and interact. I cannot do that with a chicken breast. It doesn't really work that way.
How do you make a muffin sing or smile,
exactly.
right?
Or look pretty all the time. Yeah. So, I have come a long way, that's for sure.
That's good. Like I say, I feel like that makes a lot of us feel a lot better to hear that. So what was the thing that helped you the most, you think, as far as, really getting it as far as food photography is concerned?
I'm going to say two things. One, embracing a reflector was huge.
Yes.
I'm going to say three. So
Okay.
embracing a reflector was number one, like the biggest thing that changed the game for me. Because it's important that people don't realize that they need to light both sides of food.
Yes.
You know, like moody food photography is beautiful, but even that is well lit. And I think that people don't understand that the light will fall off, and food needs dimension, and it needs to show movement, and it needs to show texture and all that stuff. And reflectors are a huge way. Number two, close up your aperture. So like, don't shoot a piece of cake at 1.8 because nothing's going to be in focus.
Yes.
And my biggest food photography pet peeve is things that are not tack sharp. So
That are not what?
tack sharp.
Oh.
I like
yes.
food to be pretty tack sharp. So bump up your aperture. So like a 3.2 to a 5.6 is a really good place to start if you're a new photographer, which means you're going to need extra light. So please like trust your camera and bump your ISO up.
And make sure you got that reflector handy.
Yeah, exactly. Like push as much light on it as you can.
Yeah.
And I always shoot handheld. I'm super lazy. I don't shoot anything on a tripod.
A tripod is kind of a work. You do have to adjust it all the time. So I can see where that's an advantage.
Yeah. So that for me is just because I'm lazy, and I just always shoot handheld. So for me, that means making sure my shutter speed's high enough also. And then the third thing is just, you really have to practice, you know, like, if you're a food photographer, that's awesome, but you also should just be a really good photographer and, you know, shoot your life around you. So as much practice as you can get, the better you'll be at shooting anything, especially food.
Great tips.
You know, I think that well-rounded photographers, I don't really see a difference at myself anymore between being a regular photographer and a food photographer. The process is different, but I think just having like the skill set to take pictures is something that translates. And the more pictures you take, the better you are. I mean, when people ask me photography stuff, and they ask me a lot, my best advice is just shoot every day. You know, like the beauty of digital is you can throw it away, you know?
Yes, that's right.
And I throw away a ton of work. I do.
And then you're learning framing, and you're learning the light and how it's,
exactly.
How it shoots well.
And, you know, your eye gets better. I think the thing about being an artist, and it took me a really long time and some therapy to say that out loud, is that I'm an artist. Is that we see the world differently. And, you know, like, the more I shoot, the better my eye gets. And I think another thing about artists is we have really good taste. Yeah. But sometimes it's really hard to get the idea in our head.
Right. I was just thinking that.
Yeah, it's hard. You have the idea in your head what you want it to look like, but you don't necessarily know how to get there. But you also, the more you practice, the closer you get.
I think that's right.
So I think just, you know, I take my camera everywhere. I shoot
and that's
all the
the thing
time.
is, like, when you take your camera everywhere, you really learn it. You learn what works for it. And that's how I feel like, you know, when you have something in your head and what you're doing isn't looking like that, the more that you practice, the more that you know the skills of your camera and know the skills of yourself and the lighting, the more you can actually start to make things look like what you want in your head.
Well, the other thing, too, is you have to remember your camera is just a tool. You know, it's just like your stove or your KitchenAid or whatever. It's a tool. Like, the KitchenAid doesn't make good cookies. You make good cookies, right?
Right. Yes.
Same with pictures. The camera is just a tool, and I have lots of cameras. I shoot with an iPhone all the time. I shoot with a point and shoot. I shoot with a DSLR. I have something on my person at all times, and I just think the more, it doesn't really matter what the tool is, because you can take exceptionally beautiful iPhone photos if you start to, you know, take them with an artistic eye. And so that's my advice for photography.
Oh, it's beautiful. I love it.
Thank you.
Okay. So far in, you know, as you've been, you know, you made this transition into food blogging, and you're traveling around a lot, you know, because you mentioned that you move every so many few years. So what have you found in that duration of time that it's been your favorite about food blogging?
The people. The people have been amazing.
People in food blogging?
Yeah, all of them. Like
Yes.
the food bloggers that have, it is a small community. I mean, it's a big, small community,
Yes.
but the people are amazing. The readers are amazing.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
For someone like me that moves all the time, I don't necessarily have real life.
Right.
That's the wrong word.
No, I get
I don't,
you.
I don't have in-person friends right away sometimes.
Yes.
And, the people from my food blogging life have really filled in some gaps. And actually, we lived near you in Kansas for a few years, or for actually just 1 year. And I was having a hard time. I was a fish out of water. I didn't know a single person other than my husband and my children. And I think I was there for 3 days before Kristen Doyle of Dine and Dish invited me to a blogger dinner.
Oh, that's so
And
nice.
it was the nicest thing ever.
Yeah, she's
She has
great.
no idea what that meant to me
Yeah.
because I didn't know anybody. And so the people make food blogging worthwhile.
Yes.
Between
That's
my
beautiful.
readers and other bloggers, and it's been the most amazing gift.
Oh, that's
Truly.
wonderful. Okay, so has there been a part about food blogging that you have found to be less desirable? Something you don't like so much?
Yes. I don't like talking about myself very much.
Yeah.
And I feel like, I started at a time when the blog world looked a lot different. I kind of got into it at the cusp of like the blogging boom, if you
Yes.
will. And, there was a definite different vibe, like people still commented and you didn't have to promote yourself as much. And working with other people was easier. There are definitely some things that have changed in a way that I don't necessarily love. And I'm terrible at self-promotion. Like, it is my least favorite thing ever. I will do just about anything not to do it. But, yeah, so I don't love social media, to be perfectly honest with you. I just feel like it's a hamster wheel that you sometimes feel like you can't get off.
Yes.
And it can easily take over the joy of why you got into blogging in the first place.
I love your point there. In fact, this kind of transitions very nicely into the topic of
It does.
of the show today, which is you talking about your email. I'm really intrigued to talk with you about this more because I actually am feeling the same way lately. Like, I do agree that I feel like social media starts to feel like this hamster wheel because, and let me explain so everybody kind of gets what we're talking about here. With social media, they change the algorithm so often, and it just feels like, Pinterest is a great example. You have to share your content so consistently there that, without that, you're not going to get as much as coverage as you used to be. I mean, I guess you could say that about all of them, really, but
Totally.
that starts to make me feel like I'm on this hamster wheel where I'm just constantly having to share the same content over and over again, and I don't really enjoy that part.
Well, I agree with that also. But I also think there's a new platform every couple of days.
I know. Yeah.
Like, the only reason why I'm ever on Snapchat is to stalk my kids. I don't use Snapchat for myself, but like, I understand why people like that platform. But as far as I feel like it's one more thing for me to do.
Right.
And, yeah, so I totally understand. It's incredibly frustrating to me. And I tried outsourcing it for a while, and I do actually still a little bit. And that has been very amazing and life-altering for me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm not necessarily comfortable with the idea of anything that has my name on it not being my own voice.
Yes.
And so I'm a little hesitant to share anything. So I outsource my Pinterest. And even that has been helpful. But at some point, I just am like, I can't do this all the time.
Yeah.
I try.
It's interesting. It's interesting that you say that about outsourcing because I did that once too. I mean, I still do a little bit. I have somebody who does a little bit of work for me, and so we had it in a certain area, and then I decided to have her help me make some comments on some posts, and I went and looked at something that she wrote in my name, which said something about, it was a coffee dish, and she mentioned something about how much she loved coffee, or in my voice again. I don't like coffee, so that's like a small example of how somebody might say something perfectly innocent, but it doesn't really fit me.
And I feel a very strong responsibility to be authentic.
Yes,
I feel like if people come to my blog, they need to engage with me because,
right.
like, I'm not anything special, but my blog is called Baked Bree. You know, like,
Yes.
I mean, I feel like they have to get me, and
Yeah.
I feel like I have to be the voice of it all the time. And I've made a decision that my family is more important than, you know, pushing the agenda of my blog. And I mean, I've made a lot of decisions in the last year or so that are kind of pushing me back to where I started from in blogging. And I also know that people pay their mortgages on their blogs, and I am 100,000% supportive of them.
Yes.
But it's just not the right decision for me at this point.
Right.
I pulled all the ads off my blogs.
Wow.
I, you know, made a very concerned effort to not be on social media as much. And I feel like my blog is my own again. And that's a nice feeling.
That is a nice feeling because then, you know, it brings back the passion for it, right?
Well, yes. And, you know, I still do some sponsored work, and I'm very deliberate about who I choose to work with. And it's usually brands that I've had very long relationships with. But there were certain ones where I just felt like I couldn't say what I needed to say in my own space.
Yes.
You know, like, not that I'm exactly, you know, I don't know, provocative or, you know, anything. I don't like to talk about politics, sex, or religion, but like, I just felt like I couldn't be myself.
Yeah. We're not trying to, like, you know, you're not going to talk about secret tattoos or, you know.
But like, I just felt like I couldn't, you know,
I got you.
Be myself a little bit. And so I made a decision that I was going to do it. And actually, it was the best decision I'd made in a long time. Do I miss the money? Sure, of course I do. But I've also made up for it in different ways. So it's all kind of a wash. And so that is kind of how I feel about the thing that I don't like the most about blogging. But because of that, I started my newsletter, which has been one of the best things I've ever done.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about your newsletter because I subscribe. And in fact, I think it was Kristen that recommended it to a group that I was in, and I signed up. I mean, you and I met at a Mixed conference a couple of years ago. But then when Kristen recommended your newsletter, I signed up, and I absolutely see why she recommended it. It's very, why don't you explain what you do in your newsletter?
So here's the backstory about my newsletter. So I was a photographer beforehand, and I was living in Sacramento at the time. And one of my really good friends was encouraged me to attend like a wedding professional event with her. And this was 6-7 years ago. This was about the same time that I was just starting Baked Bree. I mean, I don't think it was more than like 6 months old. So she had encouraged me to go to this event with her, and I did. And the person speaking just wouldn't stop talking about building a list. And I had no idea what he was talking about. And he said, you need to like collect email addresses or whatever. And I was like, okay. And I mean, at this point, I don't know anything about blogging. I'm like completely green. I don't know anything. So I did what he told me, and I, you know, put an opt-in box, and I started collecting emails. And, you know, there were times when I was really good about it, when I would like send a monthly email or whatever, and then I wouldn't send one for 6 months. And I wasn't the best sender of newsletters or emails even. So fast forward a couple years, I'm getting a little bit frustrated with food blogging, and my youngest was going to kindergarten, and I really was having a hard time with it. So I decided to go to nutrition school. So I did that, and I was doing a little like nutrition coaching. And I had 2 separate websites. So I had breehester.com and I had bakedbree.com. And I really was kind of stupid in the idea that I felt like at the time I had to be 2 different people. Like I couldn't, right. I had one brand that was health and wellness, and then the other one was like, oh, I make cookies.
Yes.
So there was definitely a disconnect. So, and I had this like beautiful, beautiful website for Wooden Spoon Kitchens. may they rest in peace. I love them so much.
Aww.
Did all of my sites. And they made this beautiful one for Bree Hester, and they made baked Bree. And I just couldn't maintain both at the same time. And I worked with actually a business coach, and she's like, I don't understand you. Like, you are the same person, so you need to just merge them together. And I was like, oh, I could have saved myself thousands, but thank you. So I had this audience at Bree Hester and this audience at Bake Free, and I had to figure out a way to merge them together. And I got the idea that I was going to merge my two lists, because I was collecting emails on both, that this was a good way for me to show more of my personal life and, the things that I really believe in, because I am more than food. Like, I'm really into photography. I'm into home design and that kind of stuff. And it was a good way to connect with my food blog readers. So I started the newsletter, and it basically has had the same format since I started. It's basically a little like head note section. Sometimes it's like a coachable lesson. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'll talk about something that I'm having a challenge with, and then I might give some suggestions on how to fix it. Or I might just talk about my weekend. Or one that I got a lot of response was I was talking about how hard it is to have a middle school child. I was like, we had a rough week with my oldest son, and I wrote about it. And one, it was cathartic for me, but I got such sage advice from people. It was amazing. So there's always a head note section. And some weeks are fluffy, some weeks are really deep, some weeks are long, some weeks are short. Like, there's no rhyme or reason. I also should mention that I usually write them either Thursday night or like Friday morning. Like, there's nothing pre-written. It's completely on the fly, because it goes out on Friday at 3 p.m. And the second section is things that caught my eye over the week. So all week I'm like curating things that I'm seeing around the internet. So interesting articles, cool recipes, things that I might want to buy, great ideas, places I might want to travel to. Like, anything and everything is game. And there's probably like 10 to 15 bullet points. And so people can click around. Like, someone told me that they felt like it was a scavenger hunt, which I thought was a really cute way to talk about it.
Yeah.
And then I end it with like a PS. These are 3 posts you might have missed. And then I usually theme them. So like, I might pick like 3 to 5 blueberry posts that I've written and theme that in the bottom. And that's it. And then I send it out. That's it. Sometimes I include a couple pictures or whatever. It is not something that I sit down and like have a agenda for or a plan or anything like that. Like, it is very authentic, organic. Like, sometimes I sit down, I have no idea what I'm going to talk about. But the thing that's amazing about it is by far the thing I've gotten the most engagement and response from.
And probably because you are being so authentic, don't you think?
I think so. I think in this day and age of, like, Instagram perfect and very curated, and, people see what you want them to see. Yes. I think people like a little bit of rawness. I think people like to see that people are human and that we struggle. And so it was a way for me to coach people. Like, it was a way to bring those two audiences together that essentially were the same. Like, my readership is primarily women. We're primarily mothers. Like, my demographic is college to grandmothers, but essentially we've all been there. Like, whether the mothers that haven't gotten to that point yet or the grandmothers that have been through it 4 times. And so it's just been this amazing environment for me. I think, I should also say I've gotten much more out of it than anyone will ever get from me. Oh, it's been one of those things where I've made like authentic friends. Like, I have a legitimate pen pal. Like, I have this reader, her name is Susan. I love her. And anytime I send something, she writes me a note back. Like, I send her Christmas cards, like, I have gotten so much out of it. And it wasn't something that I did, with a purpose necessarily. It just kind of happened. And I think that it's a really good way to give people insight into who you are what you value. It's just it's a different look, I guess.
It's interesting because I think a lot of people I've talked to talk about the, air quote, good old days of food blogging. I think that connection is what we're missing. And it sounds like the email newsletter might be a way to do that.
It really is. And, no one comments on my blog anymore. And there used to be a very lively conversation in my comment section.
Yeah.
And I've also been incredibly fortunate that my readers are not mean. Some people get the most hateful, rude comments.
Yes.
I've gotten maybe 3 over the course of my entire blogging career.
Yeah.
So I think that it's always been sort of a positive place, but that isn't there anymore. People aren't really ingesting my content necessarily behind their desktop computer. They might be on their phone or wherever, and they're not responding to things, even if I ask them to, which is fine. I get it. I don't really respond to blog. I don't make blog comments anymore either. Right. So I totally understand that. But I did miss the engagement. I missed the interaction. And I didn't really know that until I started doing this.
Yes.
I send out my newsletter to a pretty healthy size list. And any single person that writes to me back gets a response back.
Nice.
I write to every single person that writes to me because I feel like if they take the time, even if it's just like, hey, I really liked your newsletter this week, they deserve a thank you. And that starts a conversation. I'm also a really big reader, and I talk about books all the time in my list.
Yes.
Or in my newsletter. And people will say, oh my God, I read this book over the weekend and I thought of you because I know you'd like it. That's amazing. People are thinking about me. And I really, really love it. It has been the best thing I've ever done for my blog.
I love hearing this because I do think it's easy. I think that maybe one of the things we don't like about social media, although we may get some engagement on social media, but it feels different than, hearing from a reader saying how much, like a book that you're reading and talking about. That's so different than just the food,
I also had someone, my address is not, actually my old address is on it because on an email address, you have to put your address, which I have no problem with. I know people some people do, but I feel like there are crazies everywhere and whatever. It's just not something that bothers me. But sometimes people will send me magazine clippings of a recipe they think I might like. It is a different kind of relationship.
That is very nice. Let's just clarify for everybody. I don't think this is MailChimp or the service that's used that requires this. I think it's actually an FTC guideline.
I think it is. You have to have, you can have a P.O. box or something like that. You can really get dinged if you put a fake address on. Because some people will write 123 Main Street.
Yes.
I feel like if people trust me or if people are willing to give me their email address, I can give them my address. I don't really think it's a huge deal. And I never actually thought about it. So, and it's not predominant. You really have to kind of look for it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just think it's an interesting idea. Now, also, let me time out for a second. Okay. I don't get a ton of spam mail. I've gotten 2 letters ever in 7 years. So I don't want people to think that there's all these people going to be freaking out and sending them mail. But you just don't get that from your blog. Yeah. No one would ever think to be hey, I'm reading Savor this month and Bree would love this recipe and I'm going to tear it out and send it to her. I would never get that. From my blog. You know what I mean?
Right.
And yes, there is engagement in Facebook comments sometimes, but I don't want to sit behind my computer all day.
I know, that is the thing.
I don't want to do that. And so yeah, it's a concession, I think. And I really, really do struggle with that because I also find that, which is kind of interesting after what we've just been talking about, but I find that I'm more private now than ever too. So while I have no problem telling things that are personal to my email list, I would not put them on Facebook. I feel like there's a different kind of trust
Yes.
And I just don't like I don't know. And also I think my children are getting older, so I'm a little more cautious about what I put out there publicly.
Yes.
And so I just think that I don't want to spend as much time on social media. And I also know that that makes me less marketable. I get that. And I'm okay with that. And I again, like, it's just my own choice. I completely understand why people do it. And some people love it. It's just not for me. It's not my personality.
Well, you were just talking about on your newsletter how you shared a story about your middle schooler, and that probably, I couldn't imagine that'd be something you would share on Facebook or even on your blog. But you can do that by newsletter, and it feels more private that way.
And also, like, I don't want him to stumble upon it.
Yes.
Right. I was listening to Jeremy Cowart the other day. He's a photographer, and he's really he has this amazing video circulating around, and he makes this point that, like, we are the first generation of parents where our kids can look up every second of their lives.
I know. That's true.
Like, we didn't have that. And so I think about that all the time. Like, what are my kids going to see that I posted?
Right.
And so this is something that I think about. My kids are 12, 10, and 8. And I feel like I can talk about them. And I also ask them, like, I would never post something at all, regardless of the medium, without talking to them about it. Especially if it was something personal, like I was talking about my middle schooler. But I think that there's a difference between putting it in someone's email. It's almost like a letter that I write to you.
Right.
Like, I sit down and write you a letter versus a 3-sentence blurb making a complaint about something.
Yeah,
like,
I wanted to ask you about that. So the voice you use is really first person. It's like, these are the things that I'm going through.
Very first person.
Yeah.
I also try really hard not to complain. It's something that's another reason why I don't love social media, because I think people just can complain, and I don't need that energy.
Yeah.
So it's a very positive kind of thing. Like, I'm not naive enough to think that people don't have stuff going on, because they do. Everyone does. Right. Everyone has trials and tribulations, myself included. But I also think that we choose to be happy, and that we make that choice every day. Yeah. And that is something that I talk about all the time in my newsletter.
Well, and I think you also will talk about things that you're going through, but you do share it in a light of, these are the things that we're working on. It's not like we're being defeated by this. Yeah.
No, and I'm, when I was talking about my middle schooler, I wasn't complaining or trash talking him in any way. I was asking for advice. I was really coming from a place of, like, hey, I know you guys have been here and I just haven't yet.
Yeah.
Can you help me? And people did, and it was amazing. Really and nice. I think it was so nice. And I needed to be reminded that this is just a season. This is not going to last forever, and this is not the biggest deal in the entire world either.
That's right.
And so someone wrote to me that, like, it was a grandmother, and she's like, hey, you know what? This is just like a blip. It's going to be fine. And, like, in the whole scheme of your life and his life, like, you're not going to remember this a month from now.
I guess it could take a village, even, on the internet to raise a child.
Not all of them are that heavy, and
right.
Right. But so, it's just been a really amazing way to have a different sort of conversation. It's very personal. It's very fun, I tell some really embarrassing things about myself.
I was going to ask you if you've ever done anything that you think, oh, I can't believe I did that.
Yeah, I have no problem sharing, like, links about marriage and stuff. There's, spoiler alert, there's one that I found this week that I thought was great. It was like, if people that, like, couples that share household chores have more sex, I would totally put that in there. I can't really put that on my blog, but I would put that in there,
Yeah.
And I usually give a disclaimer, like, hey, we're going to talk about sexy time. And, like, people don't, I've never gotten, like, I can't believe you said that on there.
They probably go straight to it.
Exactly. You can see what people click.
Yeah.
Because that's a part of life, like marriage and traveling and kids and your house and, like, all those things. And so I try and keep it like varied. I do talk about books quite a bit.
Do you ever look at that as research to see what, if you're putting a bunch of different kinds of links in the bottom, curated, do you ever look at that as research to see, okay, there's a lot of people who click on the books that I'm reading, or they're clicking on Sexy Time or whatever? It's kind of research.
It is kind of. It's not really, because I don't ever write it with a plan.
I see.
It's not something that I do for anything really. I did it in the beginning just as a way to bridge my two brands together, but really it was for me. It was just like, hey, this is what I saw. I liked it. And it was like, I do write it with the intention that I'm writing to my best friend.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is what she would like to see. And so I never had a plan. I've never tried to monetize it. And I could. I just feel like it's a place just to do something that I love, and a way to connect with people in a different way.
And I just love what you just said, like pretend like you're writing to a friend, because I think, the voice that you use there, it just is there's a lot more energy to that, I think, than sometimes the way we even write on our blogs, I think.
Yeah, and I think I read the other day, and I could totally be wrong, but like Google is punishing is not really probably the right word, but doesn't really like head notes anymore. Like they want less and less writing. And that's great, but my blog is more than a recipe blog too.
Yeah, that's true.
There's a story behind the food that we eat. There's a story behind the things that I make, and I don't want to have to be censored.
Yes.
So it's another place where I can just say what I want to say, and I'm not going to get dinged by Google. Like, it's not searchable, but I think how people talk about like trust. What was that? No like and trust factor.
Oh, I don't think I know that one. No like and trust.
No like and trust. I have a lot of no like and trust because people know me really well. And I think that people I don't know if they necessarily listen to what I say, but I think if I say something, they take me seriously.
I see. Because they know you.
They know me. They like me. They trust me because I tell them things that I'm telling like I would to a friend.
I think it's interesting that you're saying this, because I do feel like, talking about that Google, the way they're changing the way they send traffic to different sites, and, maybe they ding you for certain things. It almost feels a little bit like they're kind of making us all homogenous, the same. They don't want all these personal stories on the recipe. It just should be about the food. And at that point, then it can be like we're all doing the same thing. But I love this, that, you can find other ways for your audience to get to know you and your voice and who you are. That's sometimes challenging, but this newsletter sounds like a way to do that.
I think it is. And I think, again, because I crave more privacy in my life.
Yeah.
If I didn't, I think I would do it on Instagram. I think I'd probably be more of a microblogger on Instagram.
Yes.
But it just isn't the right platform for me. But this was the right way for me to do it. And I also think I should say too that I don't get my feelings hurt if people unsubscribe. I don't.
Oh, that's a hard one.
It doesn't, but I don't even look, to be perfectly honest with you. The only reason why I might know it all is because every week when I go to write it, and I pick which list I'm sending it to, like, it gives me the number, and I might have, like, in the back of my head, like, oh, it went up and down a little bit, whatever.
Right.
Because if someone's unsubscribing, that's fine, because they're not my people.
Yes.
Just like you're not going to invite everyone you know to a cocktail party. Like, I don't want people to be there that don't want to be there.
Right.
And I also really value people's inboxes. Right. I completely have no problem with someone unsubscribing because they don't want to be inundated with email. I get that. I unsubscribe from stuff all the time. It does not hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
And I'm also fine if people don't open it. I have a pretty decent open rate, but they bounce around all the time. And you know what? I totally get it. And I have really good friends in my real life that are like, hey, I didn't open the last two. I'm like, totally fine, guys. Like
I'm not going to come knocking on your door. Why didn't you open my last email?
But, so I think you also need to understand that, like, it's a different kind of relationship, and you have to be respectful of people's time and inboxes. And I also understand that the more people read, they'll decide if it's the right thing for them. Yeah. And as I do it more often, and I've been doing it probably a year now, maybe over a year, I'm getting to the core of my people. These are my people. This is my audience.
Well, and playing off the thing that you said earlier, that you are an artist, which I totally believe is true. Then, the thing about an artist is that you put that out there, and then you have no control over it after it leaves your hands, No. And so I think that's kind of the beautiful thing about this, is you're sending this email out, and that, I think the message that I think everybody needs to hear there is that if people unsubscribe or if they don't open, don't look at those as negatives. Just make your art into the form of the newsletter and then release it.
Right. And honestly, I kind of do that. Like, as soon as I hit send, I'm done. I don't move on. I don't check. I will respond to people that write to me. Yeah. But I put it out there, it's done. I think the reason why this has been so successful for me at this point is because I didn't have an agenda for it. Yes. I wasn't using it to sell something. I wasn't using it for clicks. I wasn't using it to get more page views. I wasn't using it for affiliate marketing. I wasn't using it for any of those things, which I have a little bit now. I mean, I've never monetized it, but I'll put an Amazon link to a book that I've read.
Right.
But that was never my intention. Yes. And so I think that also comes out loud and clear. Mm-hmm. I think the other thing too is I don't read a ton. I mean, I read a lot of blogs, and not all of them are food blogs, but I think a lot of times when you read someone's blog, they're asking you for something, whether they want you to buy something or read something or click something or, follow me here, follow me there, whatever. This is just for joy. It's just something else that they get that they can enjoy. And I think it comes from a pure place. Yes.
I like
that. Does that make sense?
It definitely makes sense. And it leads me to a couple of questions I want to ask you about it. So, can you talk about what service that you use?
Sure. I use MailChimp.
Okay. Me too. I use MailChimp.
I love MailChimp. I think so I have used MailChimp for a really long time. And for a little while, I moved to Infusionsoft, which I had been recommended, and I did it. It's really expensive, and I didn't like it. I mean, first of all, it was so above my needs. I think if you were selling multiple products and that kind of stuff, it's great. But the thing that I really didn't enjoy about it, and this is another thing that I feel like is important, is I couldn't make it pretty. I didn't code and I didn't know how to do it, but MailChimp is like drag and drop. It's super easy.
It is.
And Mad Mimi is the same. I think a lot of the services are very similar.
Yeah.
I just chose MailChimp. And I also really like their monkey. So I think that...
Did you give it a high five when you hit send?
Oh, yeah.
I did too.
Actually, I've used MailChimp for a really long time. And I've seen them at Alt Summit and stuff. And my kids have the MailChimp... They have these knitted monkey hats.
Yes.
That they gave out. I wear a MailChimp t-shirt to bed all the time. I think they're a nice company. It's inexpensive. This is the other thing. Once you hit the threshold, you're right. It is an expense. Yeah. I pay $150 a month.
Wow.
And you know what? It's a pretty happy $150 that I spend every month. It's something that I get a lot of return out of, and I'm happy to do it. I feel like it's the cost of doing business. So it doesn't really bother me. But I do like MailChimp. I think they also have really good customer service.
Yes, I agree with that. And don't they give you the option of being able to go through and kind of cull your list from time to time? So if you've had somebody who has not opened it after so many times, then that might be a good time to take them off the list.
But I really should do that. And that also helps your open rate if you're concerned about that. I haven't done that in a really long time because the way the thresholds for numbers work, it's a pretty wide girth at this point.
Yeah.
And I think I have to get like another 3,000 subscribers to hit the next pay tier. But it's like a 10,000 gap, you know?
Yeah.
So at this point, I'm just like, that's one less thing for me to do. But yeah, I should clean it out. And if that's a concern of yours, you should. They also have it where you can pay per send. You know, you don't have to do monthly. You can do it per send. So yeah, it is not cheap, but I love it. Oh, also, Mad Mimi is a really good service also. And I think it's less expensive. Lots of newsletters that I read are on Mad Mimi. And actually, I used Mad Mimi years ago in the very, very beginning. The reason why I don't change them very frequently, because there's another service out right now called ConvertKit that I've heard really great things about.
Yes.
The reason why I won't do it is because then I need to change all my opt-in boxes. I have to have everything recoded. Oh. Because all of my boxes are hard-coded.
Okay.
And I just don't want to do that. So I
just want to clarify for people, the opt-in boxes where people subscribe to your email list.
Right.
And do you have it? So I'm just curious about this. Do you have where you have a multiple kind of list people can sign up for? Like they can sign up to get every time you publish a post, they would get it automatically? Or do you have just the newsletter?
I have two. So I have that's actually a good point. I use MailChimp also for my RSS feed.
Okay, yes.
So if someone opts to get the new post delivered to their email address, I do use MailChimp. And that's a completely different section of my website.
Yes.
So anyone that opts into my box at all is on my main list. Because you can segment it, you can make multiple lists, whatever. I have one big list that I send to my Happy Mail because I was trying to reach two audiences. I merged them together. I've never had anyone be like, why am I getting this? You know, nobody really, because people really liked it. And if they didn't, they would just opt out, which is totally fine.
Do you have any kind of welcome, an email that comes to people when they sign up?
Yes. So I have, one of the biggest things I think I've learned too is that people don't come to your blog on your homepage anymore. You know, they come on, from Pinterest or Facebook or wherever.
To a specific post, yeah.
To a page.
Yeah.
So I have multiple places where they can opt in. If you go to bakedbree.com and you go to the homepage, you will see a pop-up. I use a plugin from Natalie Lucier, and it's called Pop-Up Ally. And I do use the paid version. It's called the polite pop-up because I hate pop-ups, I really do. But they also have the best conversion rate. Yeah. So if you come, it knows that you've been there. And if you don't opt in, it doesn't talk to you again. It knows. It's nice. It's very polite.
Yeah.
So I have that one. I have one in my sidebar. I have one on the bottom of each page and post.
I see. That's nice. That way, like you say, people come in on a particular page and not the home page. They still have that option to sign up.
Right. I also encourage, on my About page, I have it in there also hey, you might want to check out my Friday newsletter and then do a direct link to it. Because that is where I want my people. You know, the thing about email lists, let me go back to that because you asked me a question about the welcome. I do have an opt-in gift, and it is an ebook of recipes. It's not a big deal. Honestly, I think I'm going to start changing them out more frequently. I've really considered doing a library.
Yeah.
Where if someone opts in, they get a page where, because sometimes in my newsletter, I will give away, I might take a picture that I really like that doesn't fit on Baked Brie. So I'll make it into a wallpaper and I'll give it to people that way. And so I think it's a nice idea to have a place where people can get ebooks that I've written or desktop wallpapers.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, I think that's the direction I'm going to move towards.
And then you can change it up just change it on that page, right?
Yeah, or you can just add it to the page. And the other thing is if someone opted in 6 years ago, they got the cookbook. they're not going to get the new stuff.
Yeah.
So this is a way to keep it fresh. And if people like, I would say, hey guys, check the library this week. I put some new stuff in there.
Nice.
So I think it's a way to keep it fresh and current.
I like that.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And there's a couple of people that do an excellent job with their newsletters. The first one that comes to mind is Susanna Conway. She's a photographer out of London, and she sends a love letter once a month, and it's great. And so she is a good person to look at if you're thinking about doing this in like a real and authentic way.
That's great.
Yeah, that's a good one. Then we were talking about...
What about the transition when you talked about how you had the two sites and you were merging them into one?
Yeah.
I mean, I say that because, I'm thinking about the people that have an email newsletter list and they haven't been doing much with it. And now all of a sudden they've decided to make it a theme. I just feel like there can be some trepidation about how to move forward with that. I mean, do you just like send out an email and say, okay, now this is going to be a once a week newsletter, and you don't worry about the fact that people may go, this is not what I signed up for, or what,
Yeah, I think that they're going to opt out if they don't want it, and
right.
That's fine because it weeds out your people. I think the other thing about this is if you do commit to doing this, you really need to commit to doing it. I've missed one Friday in over a year.
Wow.
Because people expect it in my inbox. And actually, that's not true. I've missed twice. And one Friday, I don't even really remember what happened, but there was like some sort of like family crisis and I didn't send it out. And people emailed me the next day like, hey, are you okay?
Wow.
Because they were so used to hearing from me that they knew at 3:00 they were going to get an email in their inbox.
Now, see, that does sound like the old days of blogging when,
Yes.
if you normally posted on Tuesday and you didn't, people were, worried.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think if you do it, you need to commit. And, for some people, once a week is a lot. And start with a month. Do on the first of the month, do a June one. Yeah. Or June, July, or whatever. It can be whatever you want it to be. I just think that once you start, you have to commit to it.
I like that.
For it to be successful.
Right.
If you don't really have a plan or an outcome or whatever, it doesn't really matter. You can kind of do it haphazard. But I think that, again, it's trust. People trust me enough to send them an email, which is basically like going to someone's house and putting a letter in their mailbox, right?
Yes.
That I need to be respectful of that. And if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. So
I like that.
Yeah, I think it's important.
And I think what I'm hearing you say then is the real points here are to be consistent, to speak in your own voice so that you build upon that know, like, and trust. Mm-hmm. And not to freak out when people unsubscribe. And I think if you follow that, based on what you said today, that's a successful formula. I
think it's a very successful formula. And I think that the more you do it, the more return you'll get on a personal level.
Yeah.
I think the other thing about it too is if you were looking to do something larger, like if you were trying to sell a course or a book or something like that, it's so much easier to do that sell to people that know you.
Yeah.
It's so much easier to ask someone to buy something from you,
right, that
hear from you all the time.
Yes.
It would be weird if you had an inbox, like a newsletter, you collected email addresses for a long time and you've never sent them anything. But the first one that you sent them, you said, hey, buy my ebook.
Right.
You look like a jerk.
Yeah.
That's a jerky thing to do. Yeah. So this is a really good way that if that is something that you're intentionally going to do down the line, it's a really good way to get people to know you, to like you, to trust you, that they will probably buy something from you.
Yes. We probably all have had that happen in person, right? Like I met this woman and I thought we were going to be great friends. And then the next thing you know, she's trying to sell me Mary Kay. And it's like, oh, really? I mean,
yeah.
It's very disappointing. And people see right through that. But if you establish that relationship, then it's seen differently.
Right.
I mean, I probably would have bought Mary Kay from her if we would have known each other for a long time. Yeah.
if you had heard from her before the first time you met her,
Yeah.
that's weird.
Right.
So, and I think I will eventually, like, I've been working on a photography course, and I will eventually ask my list, like, hey, you like my pictures, would you like to learn how I took them? And I just don't think it's a hard sell that way. I just feel like it's a good way, because I hate self-promotion. I hate talking. I don't mind talking about myself. I don't like pushing myself on people.
Yeah.
And I think that that's an authentic way to do that.
I love this because I think this discussion gives people an alternative to social media. If they feel like, they're frustrated, I think this is just another great option, another great way of doing it.
I also think this is kind of an offset of this conversation, but I feel like, a lot of us work with brands, and brands have very high expectations of what we should be doing these days.
Yeah.
I think that we have the power to change that conversation.
Ooh, I like that.
I feel like, when someone comes to me and wants to work with me and says, hey, you really need to push this on Facebook, I can say, I don't really do that. And I just feel like none of us really want to be there. We're all struggling with this hamster wheel. Like, we need to be the change.
Right.
Because they don't know what the other side's like, right?
That's right.
So I kind of feel like, as a collective, if we're like, hey, I'm not going to sit behind my computer and post the same thing 75 times, if everybody kind of starts to do that, and everybody's like, hey, I'd like to play with my kids, I'd like to go to the park, I'd like to go swimming, whatever, because I just feel like it's, at some point, there's got to be like a give,
Yes, I agree.
And I think that building your brand in a way, which I hate that expression, like, it sounds so pretentious, but building your brand, all of us are our own brands.
Yeah.
I'm my own brand, you're your own brand, Chopped is your own brand, that we have to be ourselves. And I just don't really feel like we are necessarily. I call
it voice creep. I think the more we see other sites, it's like other people's voices start to creep into our own. I don't think it's intentional, but it happens, and I feel like it's a problem. I think so. I agree with you. I think that's another problem I have with social media, not just the hamster wheel part of it, but also that voice creep. If I really want to be authentic, sometimes, maybe doing my own newsletter is the way to do it.
Well, you know what? That's funny that you say that, because I feel that way as a photographer sometimes.
Yes.
Like, when I'm looking at other people's work, I'm only looking at my own, like, oh, I'm terrible, or like, oh, I'm not doing this enough, or oh my God, I am questioning myself.
Yes.
Which is why I don't want to be on social media all the time.
Because honestly, I think the real trick, now this is really going into another direction, but the real trick to authenticity is you have to embrace yourself. You have to and you have to 100% believe in yourself. I don't think there's any other way to be authentic myself. That's what I think.
Yeah, and I think you kind of have to, I don't necessarily think you have to put it all out there, because I don't put everything out there, but there are definitely things that I keep private, but I think that you need to put yourself out there in a way that people can relate to you,
Yes. You have to not be worried that someone's going to think, I can't believe she said that. Right. Or, you have to just be confident in yourself in that way.
And I also think we have to get over the idea that everyone's going to like us.
I agree.
That's just not going to happen.
Yeah. And I've got two fingers pointing right back at me on that one, Bree. Thank you very much.
Yeah, not everyone's going to like me, and that's fine,
Actually, I wear a red ribbon on my wrist to remind me of that all the time, that it's like, that Kabbalah thing. It's the whole point of it is that I avoid the evil eye of other people. But I just changed that to mean, for me, it's none of my business what other people think of me.
Oh my God, that's so good, because one of my good friends, she said, because I always worry about what people's expectations of me are.
Yes.
And she said, other people's expectations of you are none of your business.
It's true.
And it's so true. That is if I was ever going to get a tattoo, that's probably what it would be. Because it's once she said that to me, it was like, oh my God, she's right. It doesn't matter what anyone.
We need to create some Japanese word to make that really into one thing, one
For
word
real.
or something. It's too
It's
long
true.
otherwise.
And, like there are people in my life that I choose not to look at. And I feel like that has to be a two-way street. Like I can't get my feelings hurt if someone doesn't want to read my stuff when I don't want to read everyone else's stuff. Like that's just how it works.
Right. And sometimes it's a day. I just don't want to read it today, but I'll read it next week or whatever. Yeah.
Right.
I get you.
So, so it's the social media thing is just really hard for me. And, I just, I love it. I have like such a love-hate relationship with it. And also like as a military family, it's a great way to connect with people and stay connected. And, there's so many beautiful things about social media, but then there's some also horrible ones.
I know. I love seeing what family is doing and, I see friends doing great stuff. I love all that, but then there's this overwhelm that kicks in.
Exactly. And I also feel like, people have this power behind the anonymity of a computer screen where people will say something to me that they would never say to my face.
I agree.
And I feel like, my husband and I kind of joke that we really liked our friends a lot more before we knew so much about them.
Oh my God, that is so true. What I like to say is it's very rare to find people that you like after you get to know them.
Exactly.
I like that.
Yeah, so
look at you. We're just bearing it all here, aren't we?
I know. Your listenership just went boo.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah. But we're having a great time, so.
Right. I think that if I was gonna, put it all together, my email newsletter was a happy accident that has given me so much in the sense that it's built a community that I was missing. It's an engagement that I didn't know that I really was looking for or needed. It's given me a creative outlet because I don't have to just talk about food. I can talk about anything. It lets my readers see a different side of me, a more personal side, a more open side, and not necessarily like about life stuff, but like people see the inside of my home, or like people see things that just might not necessarily fit on Baked Brie, but that doesn't mean they're not interested, you know? Yeah. Sometimes on food blogs, like we don't have the like editorial space for stuff, like it's another way to kind of be like, and also I don't have to like write an entire post about a chair that I might have bought, but I can write a snippet about it in 2 sentences in my newsletter because people are still interested.
And you're so excited about it.
Yeah, and I love it.
Yes.
And, people are voyeurs. Like, they want to know stuff like that.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and I think it's just a safe place. I really feel like there is a level of safety and sort of protection around it that you don't necessarily get when something is so public.
Right.
And, it has been the best thing that I've ever done. And I just wish I would have done it a long time ago.
Well, I love it. And I hope it's encouragement for people who are out there that have their lists and maybe they've been hesitant or they want to do something different with it. I think this should, be some great food for thought for them.
Well, I think also if you are just starting, keep it incredibly simple. It doesn't have to be a big thing. Right. It could be like, hey guys, hope you had a good week. Here are 3 things that I wrote about this week that I thought you might like. Yes. It could be as simple as that. Or it could be, I bought this pair of shoes. Here they are.
And I love them.
Right. Like, it does not have to be a big thing. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing. I like it. It doesn't have to be like, I think you need to make the commitment to do it, but what you decide to do can ebb and flow like life does. And
pictures or no pictures, you think it's helpful to have them?
I think so. I think that, actually it's funny, research suggests, I took B school like years ago, Marie Forleo, and she says, text only. I don't want to read an email with just text. Yeah. So I like pictures. And I do change out my header. Like my email is kind of pretty.
It is beautiful.
It's something that I think that should reflect everything else. I like pretty pictures. So
Yeah.
I do include pictures because I think that, again, that's what I'm into,
Yes.
and I also might share something there that I wouldn't share super publicly, you know?
Right.
Um, I don't know why my Instagram number is much smaller than my email list, but for some reason, that feels much more protected to me. Because
You mean what you put on
can look at.
Instagram?
Yeah, like my Instagram number is significantly smaller than my email list number. So far more people get my email than my Instagram following. But it's not as public, like I'm not showing something to someone that I don't know. I guess the idea that anybody can look at my Instagram feed and see a picture of the inside of my house is a little more disconcerting to me than someone on my email newsletter.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense.
And
Yeah.
also people really have to want to. Like they have to double opt in. They have to hit two buttons to get there.
Right.
So, there's a certain vetting that goes on.
Yes.
Yeah. So I encourage, if it's even something remotely interesting to you, I think you should try it. I think that it's worth putting some energy into. I think that if you go into it with an idea that it's just a way to connect in a different way, not necessarily for gain, that it might help you get to that point where if you're missing the interaction that you used to have from your blog, it might be what you were looking for.
Wonderful. I think that's so great. And I think this has been hopefully a lot of great food for thought for people. So I want to ask you just a couple of fun questions
Sure.
that I like to ask at the end of the interview. So what's one food item you can't live without?
Oh, man. Probably cheese. I really like cheese.
I think that goes well with your site name.
It does. That's funny. Not even intentional. I like cheese a lot.
Any particular kind of cheese or
I really like cheddar.
cheddar?
I like cheddar.
And on a potato, a salad, how do you fix it?
Oh, pretty much anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like shredded cheese. Yeah, in pretty much any which way. Like, it's one of those things I always have in my house. And even if I don't want to cook, like, cheese and crackers is fine for dinner.
Nice.
Yeah.
So it's a meal and also an adornment.
Snack. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. What's the favorite app on your phone?
I really love Instagram. I mean, it's probably the one that I use the most. And I really do enjoy Instagram. Like, even if I know that that's not really real life sometimes, I think it's an amazing search function. Like, I'm going to London in a couple weeks. And it's really a great way to like decide where I want to go and what I want to do.
So you search for London or places to go in London?
Yeah, because now you can search like for place. And so the hashtag London. And there's a couple London bloggers and I like to see where they go. And I do love Instagram. And I also find that it is a place where I've been on Instagram for a really long time. I was like a really early Instagram user. And I just have a lot of like good relationships there,
Nice.
I also like that I don't have to read too much on Instagram,
that's true.
like look and keep going. And I do love Instagram.
Another thing I like about Instagram is that, now people are doing more regramming of other people's content, but I kind of like going to someone's page and this is all them. Mm-hmm. There's no expectation to, be posting a bunch of other things for other people, like maybe you have on Pinterest or Facebook.
Right.
But I like that myself.
Yeah, I think also like it's very inspiring for me sometimes.
Yeah.
I know that the Instagram curated thing really bothers people sometimes, but it also inspires me.
That's true.
I don't really look at it as like I'm not doing something. It's like I could want to do something.
Yeah, for example, like it's so easy to get caught up in all the white, and then I go to some site like A Beautiful Mess has a wonderful Instagram account, and they have all this gorgeous color, and I think, oh yes, I got to do more color. I like that.
Right. Like it doesn't necessarily make me feel bad about myself. It
just
makes me feel like it might encourage me to do something different and inspiring. Yeah. And I really like having a pretty home. And I spend a lot of time here. I work from home and I live in the middle of nowhere kind of. And so I appreciate that. you know, like I really like seeing other people's faces.
That's nice. Okay, do you have any time for TV at all? And if so, what's your favorite show?
Oh, I watch a lot of television. So I do watch a lot of television. My favorite show right now, actually, I probably have like 5. Really into Outlander. That was one of my favorite book series ever. And Outlander is on Stars. We are just finishing our 2nd season. It's a great show. Even if you've never read the books are a commitment for sure because they're really long and there's 8 of them, soon to be 9. But it's a great show. My husband and I are really into The Americans right now.
Okay.
Which is with Kerry Russell and Matthew Rice. That's a great show. Definitely not for the faint of heart. It's a little violent, but it's a great show. And the one my kids are obsessed with, and it's hilarious because it's like a love letter to my childhood, is The Goldbergs.
The Goldbergs.
The Goldbergs. It's an amazing show about the 80s. And it's about this kid who basically VHS recorded his entire life. And he puts like actual clips of it on the ends of each show. And the mom is crazy. It is hilarious. And it is so like authentic 80s. And if you were a child of the 80s like I was, you forgot half the cool, funny stuff that happened in the 80s.
Yeah.
And it's a very family-friendly show. Like there's nothing that my kids can't see. That show is hilarious. So we're really into that.
It sounds good. Mm-hmm. Oh, those are great. I can't wait to check them out. I honestly don't know about any of them, but I'm going to check them out. Those look great.
Good.
So Bree, how can people find you online?
Well, bakedbree.com. There's lots of places on my website to opt into my email newsletter, which I think is actually probably the best place to find me, and Instagram. So my personal Instagram account is @BreeHester. And I have a Baked Bree one at Everything Baked Bree. But Bree Hester is probably the best one that I would pick if I had to choose between the two.
And we should clarify how to spell Bree then.
Oh, it's BR 2 E's. BREE.
Baked Bree, BREE,
yep.
Yes. Wonderful. I have had such a great time talking with you today. Thanks so much.
I have too. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much to Bree Hester for being my guest on today's episode of the Chopped Podcast. Be sure to go to choppedpodcast.com to buy your ticket to the Chopped Conference, learn more about today's show, and you can sign up for our newsletter to get the latest on all things food blogging. Tune in next week as I talk with Kathy Hester of the site Healthy Slow Cooking about the art of promotion. We're specifically talking about cookbook promotion, but there's so much good stuff here. It can apply to any kind of promotion campaign you're working on. Be sure to tune in next week. I hope you're loving the Chopped Podcast. You can show your support for this show by leaving a review on iTunes or Stitcher. You can also share about the show on your social media or even leave a link on your own blog or podcast. And you know, I love getting your emails and messages. It means so much. You inspire me, and I hope today's show was helpful and inspirational to the work you're doing every day. Thanks for listening and have a great week.